So when one of those partners works with a divorce coach, you can start walking through, like, what is it that is keeping you entangled? And how is it serving you? Right? Like, that's one of the questions. Like, you're stuck. So how is staying in this stuck place serving you? And what might you need to get unstuck?
Hi, I'm Rachel Green, Brooklyn-based divorce mediator and collaborative attorney, and this is my podcast, Keep the Kids in Mind. Join me as I chat with other industry professionals about everything from smoothly navigating your way through divorce to prenups, all the while keeping the kids in mind. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Keep the Kids in Mind. I'm very pleased to welcome our guest today, Lisa Lisser. Lisa is a divorce coach, and I think that people will be so interested to hear what brought you to this work and what are the services that you can offer to help coach people through the transitions of their families. So welcome, Lisa.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm really happy to be here. And in the context of mediation, divorce coaching is like a perfect complement. So, I'm happy to speak with your audience about the power of divorce coaching.
Yeah, please tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, divorce coaching is a service to help people going through the struggle and the trauma and the grief of divorce manage their emotions and the business of divorce. So divorce has so many different elements, and it's overwhelming, and it's trauma, and there are multiple people involved. And as you know, it's hard to know where to start when you're first faced with divorce. Whether you're the one who has decided to make the change, or whether you're blindsided and in shock and trauma. In both cases, you still need some support to walk through the process.
So you're helping people with both, like, it sounds like all aspects of divorce. You're helping them with the emotions, whether they were the initiator or the non-initiator.
Yeah.
And as we know, it's very typical that there is one person who has perhaps been toying with the idea. Maybe that's the wrong word, but just thinking about it and weighing pros and cons and feeling ambivalent for even, years.
Yeah.
And then finally reaches their clarity and says, okay, I'm ready for this relationship to end. And then tells the other person's like, what? I had no idea that you were thinking this. And, so they might have had, the initiator might have had 2 or 3 years to adjust to the idea. The non-initiator just thinks they're going along, happily ever after, or unhappily, but ever after. And then bam, their whole life gets turned upside down. And I guess you've worked with people on both sides of that equation.
Yes, absolutely. And what people on both sides of the equation need to realize, and they feel like they're alone in their situation, but they need to realize that the person on the other side is there and at a different place. So it's like a curve. The person who's been thinking about it has processed, like, if I want to get into has processed going down sort of like the bell curve of what the emotions are already. But the person who is hearing it for the first time, perhaps, really is at a very different space. And so there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact that, one party may say, we've been unhappy, but that doesn't mean they're in the same space. And so how do you walk that person, the person who initiated, through understanding where their partner actually is in an emotional space?
I in mediation, I like to use the analogy of, like, we're a vehicle and we can't move faster than the slowest wheel. We all have to, like, move together, and that means giving the non-initiating spouse time to kind of catch up. I mean, I have one case that I think they divorced 8 years ago. And he was really blindsided, and he was the money spouse, and he called me up like 2 years later, so angry at me. He said, I was so blindsided. I didn't know what I was agreeing to. And I agreed to give her much more spousal support for a longer period of time. And you should have seen that. And I felt, terrible, but I'm not a mind reader, unfortunately. So I didn't see it. And he's kind of a sophisticated guy with a big job. And he seemed to understand the consequences of everything he was agreeing to. I mean, financially, he certainly did. But looking back at it, that was one of those cases where they were just like, not at the same point in the process, that we needed to give him time to get up to the same place.
Right. And in that kind of situation, what a divorce coach can do is do some role play, like behind the scenes when they're not in the mediation room, working with one client to say, I don't understand my partner's X. Then we can have a conversation where we do a role play. Okay, so you be X and I'll be you, or you be you and I'll play X.
Interesting.
And we can walk through different scenarios, which opens up the possibility of understanding and shifting mindsets, right? That can shift where your perspective is, and that can make a really big difference.
Yeah, very interesting. So, Lisa, in a situation like that where the spouses are really in different places, what would you work with either one of them, or do you specialize in initiators or non-initiators, or men or women, or?
I can work with either partner, and I have worked with both. The key is the person that I work with has to see the need to work with someone, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's what it is. And it's a level of knowing that they want something different. So if you're butting heads, if you're not getting to a result or the results you want, and in mediation also, it's like if you keep on sitting in the room but not able to reach consensus on important issues, then that's like a red flag. Like, okay, so let's go outside of the room and see how we can readjust ourselves so we can approach the situation in a new way.
I see. So you help them to sort of analyze why mediation is not reaching agreement and shift their perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a couple that I worked with, and this couple was like the only couple I've had in my more than 25 years of practice that was like this. But they kind of were like a reverse mediation. Like I felt like that movie Benjamin Button, where he starts out as an old man and becomes a baby at the end. Because the first session we had, I just felt like, oh, I love them. They're so reasonable and so like able to reach across the table and understand each other. And I was thinking, this is going to be the easiest case. Like, we'll have one more session, and it will be over. And then I met with them maybe 5 times, and every session more things got opened that had already been resolved. So like at the first session, I thought, oh, we're almost finished. And the second session, they went back over some other issues. The third session, they went back over more issues. It's like everything in time was opening up. And I don't know why that happened.
I think in those situations, what you find is that there is an understanding at the beginning that maybe both people in the relationship realize that the relationship has reached its conclusion, and yet the idea of actually being apart, the reality of separating is hard to swallow. And so they find the little things that keep them together. So
that's very interesting.
So when one of those partners works with a divorce coach, you can start walking through, like, what is it that is keeping you entangled? And how is it serving you? Right? Like, that's one of the questions. Like, you're stuck. So how is staying in this stuck place serving you? And what might you need to get unstuck?
Yeah. Very interesting. That may be what was going on with this couple.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, the first couple I was talking about, I mentioned them because they keep coming back, because the husband was very angry at me, that I didn't see that he was being more generous than he thinks he should have been. Um, I mean, I think that generosity never hurts you in the long run. They do have two kids together, and for him to have been generous to their mother is a good role,
Yeah.
good role model to be. But nonetheless, he's angry at her. He's angry at me. He was very hurt, and they keep like every year or two, I get emails from them saying, "Can you interpret this section of the agreement? Can you interpret that section of the agreement?" Like they're still really in conflict, even though 8 years have passed.
Well, that's another situation where they really don't want to disconnect. So being still tied to the agreement and the details of the agreement, they are still engaged with each other. And
Yeah.
and if they can leave the agreement, then that means they have to disengage from each other.
Mm,
So
interesting.
so that's a piece of it.
Right.
And so that's a place where it sounds like the husband could be coached through it, where it's not, and this is not a question of therapizing the husband. This is a question of saying, okay, so what is it that you need? And how can we get you what you need so that you can move forward? Because
Yeah.
the longer you hold on to that agreement and your your difficulty with the agreement that you agreed to, the longer you are held back from the future that you can create in a new way, right? The
Right.
future that you can create that can be better for you, better for your kids who are now way grown up because it's 8 years later. And
Yeah, their oldest is going to college next year, so right.
so their whole middle school, high school was like wrapped up in this post-divorce.
Don't right. Yeah. So, speaking of therapizing versus coaching,
Yes.
how did you get into coaching? What has drawn you to this work and made you want to work with families in transition?
So, we all take different paths, right? So, and we all take different paths in each of our lives. There's multiple paths. So, I started out as a big firm litigator back in the very beginning of my career. And I practiced law for about 7 years and then started having kids, and I couldn't balance it. So I retired from the practice of law and stayed home with my kids, built a family, got deeply involved in my community, and started doing a lot of leadership and adult learning, which I found was really powerful for me, like doing adult learning, and it was in my faith background as Jewish adult learning. Um, and I ultimately went back to school and got a master's in Jewish education.
Oh,
And at the same time, I got a certificate in spiritual counseling, which I was using in the context of addiction and recovery.
mm,
And so when I was doing this work, I realized, because in the middle I got divorced, I realized that spiritual counseling and finding a center was a service that would be wonderful to provide in the divorce context. But I didn't know how I could wrap that up as a career, right? I didn't know how I could offer it in a way that people could hear it and receive it. And a lot of coaching is about how do we open our ears? How do we connect in a way that people can receive what you're delivering? And so I did a lot of different jobs until I heard that there was such a thing as divorce coaching. And that's when I had like an aha moment. And I realized I want to train for this because I know that in the context of divorce coaching, I can also do the spiritual work and hold people's hearts while they're struggling in this really challenging, overwhelming grieving process. And that's why I took up this work.
Wow. So there's so much experience that you're bringing to this work because you've been divorced yourself.
Yeah.
You have some experience with litigation.
Yes.
You have experience as a teacher, as a spiritual counselor, experience with addiction issues, which is so challenging
It's
in
big.
the divorce context. That's just amazing. You have so many layers that you're bringing to this work. And how long have you been coaching?
I've been coaching for about 1.5 years now.
Oh,
So it's relatively new, but when I trained, I realized that at every different layer of professional career and avocation, I was doing some form of coaching.
yeah.
When I was in my master's program for education, one of my final exams was to write your autobiography as an educator. And I never had thought of myself as an educator. But
Interesting.
as an attorney, I was a litigator, and I was telling stories, and I was doing research so I could educate. And as a nonprofit leader, I was telling the stories of the people we were helping so that I could educate my community and bring them along on the not just the fundraising drive, but on the healing the world drive,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Wow.
all part of the same
It's all
sort of.
part of, yeah. But what a rich background to bring to coaching. And can you tell me a story or two of some people who you've helped through, who got through the process with your help?
Yeah. Well, I'm working with someone now who was really blindsided. Um,
Mm.
it's one of those stories where you see it on TV, you don't think it's really happening, where she found her husband in flagrante with someone else in her house. And they have 3 kids. And it's been a real challenge. And she's held herself really tight. She knew she needed help, and that's how she reached out to me. But she hasn't been able to give herself permission to feel all the feelings, because she's had to hold herself together so much for her children, for her parents. They weren't telling a lot of people, so it's really difficult. And one of the things that we talked about in our last session was that she could give herself permission to cry.
Mm.
Like, she said to me at one point, like, I thought I would be done with all of this sadness, with all of the tears that were happening. And I said to her, you're holding up everybody else. And it's okay for you to let go sometimes. And that just sort of was such a huge release for her,
Yeah.
that she was able to then move forward to think, okay, so now what can I do practically to move this process forward? Now that I know that I have permission. Like, that's part of what coaches do, is give the clients permission to feel what they need to feel, and to let go of what they're holding on to so tightly.
Mm. Hmm.
And a lot of the time, what they're holding on to is the story that they wrote in their head about what their life was going to be. And it's really hard to let go of that.
Yeah, that's one of the big losses that I see as
Yeah.
well. That it's not just the loss of the marriage, it's the loss of the future you thought you were going to have,
Yeah.
and adjusting to that change of what you're looking forward to,
Yeah.
what your life is going to be. That's
Yeah.
huge.
And the feeling of being alone in the world is a big issue when you've been a couple, regardless if you, like, emotionally you've been in line or parallel or apart, but you're seeing yourself as a couple. And so one of the things I hear is like, I can't believe I have to be alone in the world.
Hmm.
And it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But what I try to do with these clients is to let them see the spaces that they're not alone.
Mm.
And that I ask them to tell me more about that. So when they have a problem, who do they call? Like, whose husband will come and lift the X, Y, or Z, or help them with what? And there's often another person. There's
Yeah.
often a slew of other people.
Right.
So that the definition we have of being all by ourselves is also another story that
Right.
we're writing. So how do we write that different story?
And did you have to confront, I guess you had to confront these things in your own life too.
Yeah, I
So
did.
you probably are able to anticipate kind of some of the.
And I also can relate to a lot of um, the situations that some of these women are going through. And some of my clients are male as well. But a lot of the soon to be ex-spouses have the same character traits as my already ex-spouse. So I know what they're doing, and when I hear my clients saying, I really thought that he was going to show up for the kids, blah, 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 I can say, I understand that you want him to be the person that you want him to be, but he's being the person he is. And every time you expect him to do it differently, you're disappointed again. And so let's see if we can work on that, because you know that he's behaving exactly in character for him at this moment. And those are hard things to
That's so
deal.
hard. I see people grappling with that a lot. And, I find myself saying, if he wouldn't do it during the marriage, he's not going to do it during the divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's less motivation now.
Yeah.
So,
and I find also that sometimes, like going back to your couple that seemed like they were okay at the beginning of the mediation, like you can reach the same conclusion that the marriage needs to end. But when it comes time to divide things like finances and property, and now you're talking about parenting time, then territoriality climbs in. And things that seemed like you were ready to give up, you grab back at. And so that's again where you can coach people into evaluating, okay, what do you really need? What do you want? And how can you both get some of what you want, but most of what you need?
oh, wow, that's a great way to analyze it,
Yeah.
to distinguish between what they need and what they want. I
Yeah.
like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how old were your kids when you separated?
So when I separated, my kids were 11, 14, and 16. And when the divorce was final, it was about 3 years later.
Oh, wow.
So it took a long time. There was a
And
lot of dropping back.
did you have a litigation?
We didn't litigate, but we had lawyers who were litigators. We started with mediation with lawyers, and then that went nowhere. And it was not the kind of mediation that I know you do, because it was like we showed up with them at the mediator and then we left, and there was nothing on the calendar. So I didn't know what to expect. And we were both supposed to come back with a proposal, and I came back, but he didn't. And there was no moving one way or the other. So then we got different lawyers, and that was much more aggressive and cost a lot more. But ultimately, we resolved in a mediation with 3 very high-priced lawyers also in the room.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you can also help your clients evaluate different process options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's part of, like, when you're working with a divorce coach, it might feel like you're adding a cost to the process, but in fact, you're going to be reducing your costs, because you're going to be reducing the time that you're in the process, which reduces costs, and identifying your real needs so that you're
Yeah.
going to get more of what you need to get. And you'll feel
Right.
more, you will feel more that you have satisfied what you need to get.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like working with a coach can just help prepare somebody to be ready to understand their options,
Mhm.
think about it in the context of their needs versus their wants,
Yeah.
and kind of streamline the negotiations because they have someplace else to work through emotions and really, do some introspective work to figure out what is blocking me from getting this resolved, um, instead of just spinning their wheels with three lawyers in the room,
Yeah.
and paying, $1,000 an hour for a meeting when they're just not even sure what they need
Right.
at that point. So,
Right. And the other piece that we do is we we identify the questions that the client will have for his or her lawyer.
uh-huh.
The
Oh,
process
that's great too, right?
we
So that
because
you can be
well,
more
yeah.
efficient in those meetings. Yeah.
So because sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and so
Right.
you don't know how to ask. You don't even know that you're allowed to ask in
Yeah.
some cases. Like you can't get the lawyer on the phone, so then you write a 5-page email, but then nobody's going to read that 5-page email.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do we distill what you wanted to say to the lawyer?
Well, the lawyer's secretary might read it.
Maybe, right? And then the paralegal, and then it'll go back,
Right.
and then nobody will, you know,
Yeah. Right. Right. I mean, also people, don't know how the process works. So having somebody, hand holding and guiding them can help them as well. Like I was reading something on a parenting listserv that I lurk on, and somebody said, I felt like my lawyer was really nice, and she would call me up and just say, "How are you doing? What's going on?" And I felt like she was checking to see if I was okay. And then it turns out she was charging me a quarter hour for all these phone calls that were 3 minutes long that I didn't initiate, and it was terrible.
yeah, yeah. And the thing is that in coaching, um, those come with the process, right? Like you have access in a different way. So you're not billing by the minute,
Hmm.
and it's about a relationship,
Yeah.
not about time.
Yeah.
So that's another way to experience it.
Yeah, well, I think that people working with you must have a much smoother journey through their divorce process. And as a mediator, I'm always very happy when people have the support that they need outside of the mediation process. It helps my process be much more streamlined and efficient. And that's what I prefer as well. On my business's volume of number of cases, not trying to make one case spend 15 hours. So I want to feel like I'm providing a service, and I definitely feel that you're providing a
Yeah.
service.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to tell our audience about the
Well,
benefits of coaching?
so there's one more thing because I know that this um, podcast is called Keep the Kids in Mind. And I was speaking to another coach colleague of mine about um, where the children fit in this divorce process. And um, we want to keep the kids in the center.
Yeah.
But so often the kids are stuck in the middle. So, what's the difference between being in the center and being in the middle? So, I describe it like this: when you put the kids in the middle, it's like you're playing tug of war and the kids are the knot, and you're just tugging back and forth. Who gets the kids? Who gets their love? And the kids don't want to have to split their love. That's not it. And kids know what's going on also.
They
And,
do.
and they don't want, they don't want to tell mommy what daddy did if daddy did something that they think mommy will be mad about, and vice versa. Um, so we describe putting kids in the middle like the kids are like the radius in the middle of the circle, like the hub. And then every decision you make is like coming out from the kids around the circle. It's like a ray of light emanating from the kids,
That's beautiful.
so that, then you can have a meaningful resolution, and the kids will be really at the center.
And then the kids' needs, are going to guide the whole process
Yeah,
so that they'll be okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Lisa. That's very moving.
Thank you.
All right. So people can reach you at the contact information that's in the show notes. And I certainly would encourage them to give you a call and
That'll be
see whether you're a good fit for that person. And I wish you the best in your career.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And if people want to reach out to me, as you said, my website is lzlcoaching.com, and I have 30-minute free introductory sessions. So you can make an appointment right on the website.
Oh, great.
And so people can just get to know me first. We'll see if we're a fit, and then
Sure.
we can move forward from there.
Yeah, that's great. LZL coaching.
Yep.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.